On January 10th, 1954, the most advanced airplane in the world took off from Rome. 32 people on board, clear sky, a normal flight. 14 minutes later, the plane just disappeared. No explosion sound the passengers heard. No warning, no distress call to the ground, just gone. And then, 2 months later, a completely different plane. Same model, same airline, same result. Investigation teams were terrified because after weeks of investigation, they had no idea why. Not the engine, not bad weather, not a bomb. Then why? Because the windows had corners. And here is the part that should actually make you think. Every single plane you have ever been on has oval windows because of what they found that day. If any engineer ever put square windows back on a plane, you would not land safely. Let me show you exactly why. Right now, at this very moment, about 100,000 planes are flying around the world. Every single one of them, Boeing, Airbus, every brand, every airline, has oval windows. Not square, not rectangular, oval. And almost nobody who flies every week has ever once stopped and asked why. The answer is one of the most important safety discoveries in all of modern design, and it starts with something so simple. Let's start with a bag of crisps. You know when you take a bag of chips on a plane, and when you land, the bag is all puffed up, like someone secretly blew air into it while you were watching the movie? That is not the chips doing anything weird. That is air pressure. And air pressure is the entire story of this video. Here is how it works. At sea level, where you are sitting right now, the air around you is always pushing on your body, from every direction, all the time. We call this air pressure. You do not feel it because you have lived with it your whole life. It is like asking a fish if it notices the water. Now, at 35,000 feet, where planes fly, there is almost no air. The sky up there is thin, dark, and so cold it would freeze you solid in minutes. If a plane flew open like a bus, every single passenger would pass out almost immediately. So engineers pump air into the inside of the plane. They keep it pressurized, feeling like a normal day at ground level, even at 35,000 feet. That is why your ears pop when you land. The pressure is changing back to normal. Here is the important part. All that pressurized air inside the plane is constantly pushing outward, against the walls, against the ceiling, against the floor, against every window. The whole plane is basically a balloon. Now think about a balloon. When you blow it up, what shape does it naturally try to become? Round, always round. Because a round shape handles pressure the best. The force spreads out evenly across the whole surface. No one spot carries more than any other. Now imagine you take a marker and draw a square on the side of that balloon. Then keep blowing. Look at the corners of that square. The corners stretch, they pull tight, they get stressed. Because pressure cannot travel smoothly around a sharp corner, it piles up there, gets trapped. In physics, this is called a stress concentration point. In plain English, the corner is where things begin to break. Now hold that idea in your mind, because this is exactly what was happening to those planes in 1954, and nobody in the world understood it yet. The plane was called the Havilland Comet. It was Britain's greatest invention and arguably the world's. The very first commercial jet airliner in history. Faster, smoother, and higher flying than anything that had ever carried passengers before. It made older planes look like bicycles next to a sports car. Airlines were buying them as fast as the factory could build them. Passengers loved flying on it. It was in every magazine. It felt like the future. But the engineers had made one quiet decision, and nobody questioned it. The windows were square. Not fully square, they had slightly rounded corners, but essentially square. It looked clean, it looked modern, it looked great in the photos. And every single flight, those windows were quietly getting damaged, invisibly, inside the metal, where nobody could see. Here's what was happening at a microscopic level. Every time the plane climbed to cruising altitude, the cabin pressurized. The air pushed out. The corners of every window stretched. Every time the plane landed, the pressure went back to normal. The corners relaxed, stretched, relaxed, stretched, relaxed. Flight after flight after flight. You know what happens when you bend a paperclip back and forth over and over? At first, nothing happens. It looks completely fine. But you keep bending it, back and forth, back and forth. And one day, without any warning, it just snaps. That is called metal fatigue. The metal gets tired from being bent repeatedly. Tiny invisible cracks form inside it. You cannot see them from the outside. The plane looks perfectly clean and well maintained. But inside the corners of those windows, microscopic cracks were growing, slowly. Every single flight. Just a little bit longer each time. By the time that flight left Rome on January 10th, the cracks in the window corners had grown just far enough. The pressurized air inside the cabin found those tiny cracks, and air under pressure does not knock politely. The plane tore itself apart from the inside out in less than 1 second. Not from a bomb, not from bad weather, not from any engine problem, from a corner, a square corner on a window. After the crashes, the British government did something that had never been done in aviation history before. They built a giant water tank. They put entire planes inside it. They pressurized and depressurized them thousands of times, simulating years of flights in just a few weeks. And they watched. The cracks always started at the corners of the windows. Every single time. Always the corners. The fix, when they found it, sounds almost too simple to be real. Remove the corners. If there are no corners, there are no stress concentration points. The pressure flows smoothly around the curved edge. No pileup, no crack, no catastrophic failure at 35,000 feet. A circle handles pressure perfectly. An oval, a stretched circle, is even better for airplane windows because it fits naturally into the curved shape of the fuselage, and it gives passengers a slightly wider view outside. That is it. That is the entire answer. The oval window is not an aesthetic choice. It is not a style decision. It is not because someone thought oval looked nice one day. It is the direct result of 56 people dying because someone put a corner on a window. Every aircraft manufacturer in the world changed their windows immediately after this discovery. The oval has been the global standard ever since, and in the 70 years since, across billions of flights and trillions of kilometers, there has never been a single window-related structural failure on a commercial passenger jet. One shape, that is all it took. But what this actually means, for you right now today, is something the history books don't usually say out loud. Let me tell you what I think about when I sit with this story. Here is what I keep thinking about when I look at this story. The damage was completely invisible. The cracks were forming inside the metal. The plane looked totally normal on the outside, perfectly polished, perfectly maintained, checked before every flight, while it was quietly destroying itself from within. It only became visible when it was too late. And honestly, that is how most of the dangerous things in life actually work. Not with a loud warning, not with a dramatic moment, but quietly, slowly, one small crack at a time. The stress building up at the corners, the places where you thought you'd be fine. There is something else worth saying here too. The engineers who built the Comet were not stupid or careless. They were genuinely the best in the world. They worked incredibly hard. They checked everything they knew to check. They just did not know what they did not know. Nobody had ever built a pressurized jet airliner before. Nobody had ever seen metal fatigue on this scale before. They were building in the dark, and they paid for it in the worst way possible. Almost every single safety feature on every plane you have ever flown on exists because of a mistake just like this one. There is a crash behind almost every design rule, a disaster behind almost every regulation. The oval window, the emergency exits, the oxygen masks, the black box, every single one of them has a story. The plane that feels totally normal and routine, that takes off and lands without you ever thinking twice about it, is built from every lesson that was ever learned the hardest way possible. If this is the kind of story you come here for, where the thing hiding in plain sight turns out to explain everything, one tap on subscribe costs you nothing and tells me to keep making these. Because in 1954 they were square, and planes fell apart, and the world learned, and the world fixed it. This invention completely changed history, but it is actually nothing compared to the hidden engineering used inside every modern supermarket. I made a full breakdown of exactly how it manipulates your brain, and you can watch it right now, right here.